When people hear the title Think and Grow Rich, many of them immediately think about money. They imagine wealth, success, business, ambition, achievement, perhaps even the promise of a better life created by the power of thought. And in one sense, that reaction is understandable. The title itself is powerful. It is direct. It speaks to one of the oldest desires in human life, the desire to improve one's condition. But if the reflection stops there, something essential may be missed. What does it really mean to grow rich? Is it only about money? Is it only about external success? Or is there something more fundamental beneath the surface? Napoleon Hill's work is often associated with wealth, achievement, and personal success. Yet, at its core, Think and Grow Rich can also be read as a philosophy of directed thought. It is about the way the mind organizes desire, belief, attention, decision, persistence, knowledge, imagination, and of course, action. In this sense, the idea of growing rich does not refer only to financial gain. It refers to a broader process of becoming more focused, more purposeful, more disciplined, and more capable of transforming inner intention into outward movement. This distinction is important. A passing thought does not build a life. A dream that is never clarified remains a dream. A desire that is never disciplined easily becomes frustration. And a belief that never becomes action remains only an inner comfort. Hill's central message should therefore not be reduced to the claim that thinking creates wealth automatically or even magically. A more careful reading suggests something deeper. The quality, direction, and persistence of thought influence the way a person acts, chooses, learns, risks, continues, and responds to difficulty. In other words, thought becomes powerful when it becomes organized. It is advisable, then, to approach Hill's idea of success not as a promise of instant transformation, but as a disciplined philosophy of mental direction. It is not necessary to assume that every thought immediately becomes a reality. It is not necessary to treat success as a simple formula. Life is more complex than that. People begin from different places. They face different limits, different histories, different responsibilities, and different obstacles. But even with all these differences, one question remains important. What happens when a person begins to think with direction? Not randomly, not fearfully, not only in reaction to circumstances, but with purpose, with attention, with repetition, with emotional commitment, and with a willingness to act. This is where Hill's philosophy becomes especially interesting. The mind is not presented merely as a passive observer of life. It is presented as an active force in the shaping of life. The mind notices, the mind selects. The mind returns again and again to certain images, certain possibilities, certain fears, and certain hopes. Over time, these repeated patterns influence behavior. A person who constantly thinks in terms of defeat may begin to avoid opportunity before opportunity even appears. A person who constantly thinks in terms of confusion may struggle to choose a direction. A person who constantly thinks in terms of resentment may spend more energy on the past than on creation. But a person who trains the mind toward a clear aim begins to behave differently. Such a person sees different signals, asks different questions, becomes more selective with time, is less easily pulled away by every distraction, and begins to distinguish between what supports the chosen direction and what weakens it. This does not mean success is guaranteed, but it does mean that inner direction changes outer behavior. and outer behavior repeated over time changes results. For this reason, the idea of growing rich may be understood in a broader and more mature way. There is financial richness, of course, but there is also a richness of purpose, richness of discipline, richness of imagination, richness of useful knowledge, richness of relationships, richness of self-command. A person may have money and still be poor in direction. A person may have ambition and still be poor in patience. A person may have intelligence and still be poor in decision. A person may have opportunities and still be poor in belief. Therefore, perhaps the first question should not be, how can I become rich? Perhaps the first question should be, in what way must my thinking become richer? Richer in clarity, richer in courage, richer in consistency, richer in responsibility, richer in the ability to hold a purpose long enough for that purpose to influence action. This is why the word think in Think and Grow Rich should not be treated lightly. Hill does not refer to casual thinking. He does not refer merely to wishing. He does not refer to repeating positive words while avoiding reality. He refers to thought that is charged with desire, supported by belief, translated into plans, protected by persistence, and strengthened by cooperation with others. Thinking, in this sense, is not escape. It is preparation. It is the beginning of movement. It is the inner architecture of achievement. Before something is built in the world, it is often built first as an image, a decision, a conviction, or a plan in the mind. A business begins as an idea. A book begins as a thought. A career change begins as a private recognition that something must change. A new life direction often begins long before anyone else can see it. At first, it exists inwardly. Then it becomes language. Then it becomes a decision. Then it becomes action. Then, slowly, it becomes visible. This may be one of the reasons why the philosophy of Napoleon Hill still attracts attention. It gives language to a process many people have experienced, but not always understood. The outer result is usually the last thing to appear. The inner movement begins much earlier, but there is also a danger. The danger is to simplify Hill's message into fantasy, to believe that thinking alone is enough, to believe that desire alone is enough, to believe that life must respond simply because something is wanted strongly. That would be an incomplete reading. It is better to understand Hill's philosophy as a call to disciplined mental and practical alignment. Desire matters, but desire should be clarified. Belief matters, but belief should support action. Knowledge matters, but knowledge should be organized and applied. Imagination matters, but imagination should lead to planning. Persistence matters, but persistence should be joined with learning and adjustment. From this perspective, success is not merely an event. It is not only a moment when money appears, recognition arrives, or a visible goal is reached. Success is also a process of becoming internally aligned with a chosen direction. It is the process by which thought becomes intention. Intention becomes decision. Decision becomes action, and action becomes a repeated pattern. This is why growing rich, in Hill's sense, may be understood as more than final accumulation. It may be understood as the gradual enrichment of the whole person, the enrichment of attention, the enrichment of purpose, the enrichment of discipline, the enrichment of imagination, the enrichment of one's ability to act in harmony with a clear aim. Of course, financial achievement remains part of Hill's original focus. It should not be ignored or artificially removed from this philosophy, but it should also not be understood too narrowly. Money may be one expression of achievement, but before money appears, something else must usually appear first. A definite direction, a persistent desire, a belief strong enough to support action, a willingness to learn, a capacity to decide. and the discipline to continue when the first enthusiasm fades. Perhaps this is the real beginning of growing rich. Not the moment success becomes visible, not the moment external rewards arrive, but the moment the mind stops drifting and begins to choose. So it is worth pausing for a moment and asking, what does richness really mean? Is it only financial, or is there a deeper form of richness that must be built first? And one more question, maybe even more important. Is your thought already moving in that direction? This has been Gabriel from Thinking Mind.